In today's video, we're breaking down the basics of masonry construction. We'll cover different CMU types, brick types, mortar types, bond patterns, and much more. By the end of this video, you'll have a good understanding of masonry fundamentals within the construction industry. So let's go. Okay, so in commercial construction, masonry can be found under the CSI Master Format Division 0420. Let's quickly talk about the roles. First up, we've got the mason tender, who is a specialized construction laborer who supports masons, both bricklayers and stonemasons. On the actual masonry career path, you have the typical path within most skilled trades, starting as a mason apprentice and then a mason journeyman and ultimately just a mason, whether that's a bricklayer, stonemason, or working in masonry tuck pointing. The career path ultimately works towards that masonry foreman job or superintendent role or above. Next up, let's talk materials. Now, this is not an all-inclusive list, but rather the most common working materials for a basic introduction. All right, the most common materials you'll see are concrete masonry units, also referred to as CMUs. These were previously referred to as cinder blocks as they were made from coal cinders or ash and slag previously. Now they just call them CMUs. CMUs are widely used for both structural and non-structural walls, partitions, foundations, and retaining walls. CMUs are made from Portland cement, water, and aggregate such as sand, gravel, or crushed limestone, essentially just making them concrete Legos. All right, so now there are two types of CMU blocks, which are solid core blocks and hollow core blocks. From there, we have multiple types of hollow core blocks. And again, I'm just going to cover the main ones, starting at number one, which would be stretcher or our standard blocks. Now, these are the most common CMUs that you'll see on a job site. Concrete stretcher blocks are used in construction to build majority of the running length of walls. At number two, we've got lintel blocks. Now, lintel blocks are recognizable by their U shape. These are identified by the deep grooves created by that U shape. Lintel blocks are used above openings and doorways with added rebar and grout to essentially transfer the load from that opening or that doorway above to the sides, which would be your jambs of the openings. Lintels can also be made from steel angles, so masonry lintels are just one type of lintel if you do hear the term lintel in general in the construction industry. At number three, we have corner blocks, and corner blocks are just placed at the corner as you might expect or at the end of windows or door openings. And then moving on to number four, we have bullnose blocks. Bullnose blocks are the same as corner blocks in their use and function, except that they have rounded edges, which is the reason for their name. Moving on to number five, we've got partition blocks. Partition blocks are similar to the typical standard CMUs, except that they are taller than they are wide and are just used to optimize space, typically on the inside of a building. And finally, at number five, we have split face blocks. And split face blocks essentially just have one very rough surface which would be exposed, which gives it a textured look upon completion. Now, there are many more types of CMUs. These were just the main ones that I just listed. So, standard concrete masonry units typically have a nominal size of 8 inches wide by 8 inches tall by 16 inches long, but that's not the actual dimension of the block. The actual dimension of the block that you buy is 7 5/8 inches by 7 5/8 inches by 15 5/8 inches. The actual dimension is 3/8 inch shorter on all sides to allow for a standard 3/8 inch mortar joint. So after you place the mortar joint along with the block, you end up with a whole number, makes it easier to dimension out in construction. So CMUs come in a variety of other sizes. These are just the most typical. Also, CMUs come in different grades, such as grade N, which is the standard general purpose block used for both load-bearing and non-load-bearing exterior and interior walls. And then you have grade S, which is just limited to above ground, non-moisture exposed applications, but type S or grade S is far less frequently used. All right, so moving beyond CMUs, we have brick, with the two types being solid brick and cord brick. Now, these come in many sizes such as modular, standard, utility, Norman, and much more. Bricks are made from raw materials such as clay and shale, are baked at high temperatures in a kiln, which is where they get their strength from. Now, brick coloring comes from a combination of the natural mineral content in the clay, the firing temperature in the kiln, and the atmospheric oxygen levels within the kiln. We're going to keep on moving with mortar types. These CMUs and these bricks need something to hold them all together, and that is the mortar or the glue of this operation. Now, mortar comes in different types which serve different purposes. These types include type M, which is a high strength and used for heavy loads or below grade. And then we have type S, strong and flexible and common for structural walls. After that, we've got type N, which serves as a general purpose, but to be used above grade. And then finally, we have type O, which is lower strength and typically used for interior or non-load bearing work. Now, if you need help remembering these different types of mortars, just remember mason work. Pretty clever. All right, so our mortar goes between the courses of brick and block and in between them, but we also have grout, and grout is used to fill hollow cores for added structural support. And for even more support, in the addition to grout, masonry walls will sometimes require additional reinforcement, such as rebar inside those hollow cores, or ladder and truss bars laid in between courses of brick or CMU, which all add additional structural integrity. Now, after our main materials, we've got some masonry accessories to cover. First up, we've got ties, anchors, and fasteners. Now, large brick walls don't just stand up on their own. They're actually tied back to the structural framing, block, or other parts of the wall assembly behind them. In buildings with multiple stories, at some point, the ties are actually no longer strong enough to continue that load of just brick, and you'll typically see a stop and a start of brick with a steel lintel supporting the next course of brick. In between the brick and the main structure of the wall, you'll also likely see some sort of air and vapor barrier or insulation, which I'm going to cover in a future video. Okay, in some buildings that span long distances, you'll see separations of brick via expansion joints. This is based on loading and assuming differential settlement. Large spans of buildings may settle differently over a long span of time, and these expansion joints prevent extra stress in those areas. And these expansion joints don't just cover the outside or the facade of the building. This expansion joint actually continues all the way through the building so that there's a complete separation between structures. On a smaller scale, you'll see these as control joints, similar to concrete sidewalks or long runs of drywall, just giving that a little bit of a fracture point. Now, let's move back inside the brick or the wall assembly. We'll often find flashings and weep holes because the main purpose of the brick cavity is to allow water to freely drain out and away from the structure. Flashings are tied back to the main wall so that the water running down the wall stops and then follows the flashing on an angle. And from there, the water will find a weep hole, which is often a piece of fabric or mesh that is colored to match the mortar and blend in, so you actually don't ever see it. These weeps allow water to freely exit the cavity of the wall. Now let's talk about placement and installation. For laying units, blocks and bricks are laid in courses, one course at a time, often using string lines based on established elevations and control points to make sure that courses stay consistent as they build upwards. After mixing up the mortar on site using one of these masonry silos, they'll trowel a 3/8 inch layer of mortar between each course and each block or brick. Now, these courses can be installed via different patterns, known as bond patterns. I've pulled up all the different types of bond patterns here on the screen, and I'm just going to take a brief moment if you'd like to pause and review those. Okay, after the bricks are laid in their mortar beds, masons will tool the joints. And believe it or not, there's actually a ton of different joint types as well. which I've shown right here for reference. Now, masonry can get a little bit messy as they are working throughout the course of construction. So after we're done with laying the final bricks or blocks on an elevation, we'll typically go back and actually complete what's called a brick wash of the elevation that gives it that new and untouched look. All right, that was the quick breakdown of masonry fundamentals, and there is a lot more to unpack here and a lot more that goes into masonry than what I just talked about. Those were just the basics. But if you are a mason and I missed anything critical or important, please feel free to drop a comment below. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to subscribe for more construction content and help me grow my channel. It's very much appreciated, as I keep covering all of the basics similar to this video. So, thanks for watching, and as always, be better, build better, and bye for now.